New Clause 5, Corporation Tax Treatment of the Oil and Gas Industry.
The question is that new Clause 5 be read a second time. Mark Field.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Lady for Aberdeen North will be glad to know that you can come to my constituency as well from time to time. There are a few Aberdonian accents, and not just having to go out to the middle of Texas. Listen, I have a lot of sympathy for the situation she finds herself in today. Inevitably, there's been a lot of tinkering with tax rates in oil and gas. In my 15 years in the House, it seems that barely a year goes by without many paragraphs of any finance bill being part and parcel of this. And I guess what I would say in part is clearly we aren't yet to know whether the gas price and oil price is going to be stabilised at 50 to 60 dollars a barrel, or whether it will go up in different directions. And I'm sure that the Treasury will have this whole issue under a constant review. I must confess I have some apology, of course.
I thank the gentleman for giving way, but many believe that the oil and gas industry had been adversely affected by Brexit. Earlier this year, I asked the Chancellor his first Treasury question on when the people of the UK could get an insight into the scale of capital flight through Brexit. The Chancellor answered, "A series of data publications during the late summer and autumn will inform a proper response at the autumn statement." Many other honourable members in this House asked similar questions, to which the Chancellor gave a similar answer, i.e. all will be revealed in the autumn statement. Does the honourable gentleman agree that the Chancellor, having now had a few months to think about it, should at least furnish us with the date for the coming autumn statement?
I suspect we all know that the autumn statement is going to be coming up at some point in late November or early December if precedent is anything to go by. And I think what I would say to the honourable gentleman is this. And as someone who is also very firmly in favour of Britain remaining in the European Union, we have to make Brexit work. And this will take time. And I think I understand the frustration of many who would like to see a template on these matters put by the government today. But I think the government are right to recognise that we have to play our cards close to our chest. This is a diplomatic process that will take some considerable time. One of the great strengths we have had as a United Kingdom in diplomatic affairs going back many centuries is the sense of being able to make something work for the interests of this country. We have to recognise what is going on in world affairs, whether it is the oil and gas price, whether it is prices of other... if you wait a moment. Whether it is in other areas. This is an incredibly volatile time, politically and economically. And the notion that we can have any direct template in place now, or indeed, in my view, at any point during the course of this year, I think is wholly misleading. I'll give way to Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman. He's been most gracious, and I thank him for his time. The Right Honourable Member for Broxtowe mentioned real concerns expressed by the Japanese government reinvestment in the UK. This concern was also echoed when President Obama confirmed, post-EU referendum, that the EU is a much greater priority for US trade relations than the UK outside of the EU. Given US investment in oil and gas in the UK, does my honourable friend, or does the honourable gentleman agree that this government has had more than enough time to give British people a definitive definition of Brexit, and should now be informing the public of urgent action it is taking now to support important industries such as the oil and gas sector?
A huge amount of actions are taking place now, and I think it's far too early to have any definitive approach as to exactly what Brexit will entail. We have to ensure, to an extent, that we get as much of the benefit of being in the single market, and I see that obviously in the context of the City of London from the passporting rights, as much of the benefit as is compatible with the public's clear view about free movement of people. And I hope that in the months ahead we will begin to work on that. But I think it is far too early, and I think it would be doing a discredit to all industries, oil and gas and others, that are so dependent upon exports and indeed being global industries, on the expertise that they have from across the globe to be definitive about precisely what Brexit has to play. Now, I must confess, I wanted only to make a few comments, if I may, in relation to New Clause 10, which is to do with the issue of the patent box, and I'm sorry if I was moving slightly ahead of what the observations are for the Honourable Gentleman of Hayes and Harlington on this matter. There has been, I think, a danger that governments of all political colours over the last decade or so have been perhaps rather too much enthralled to certain industries, whether it's financial services, whether it's the whole global internet technology industries. I think it is worth pointing out that the benefit, and there has been a very significant benefit of the whole patent box plan that was put in place by the former Chancellor some years ago, is that it hasn't begun to enable the intellectual property value to be quantified and used on collateral in many of the fast growth companies in the technology sphere. But it strikes me that the Treasury, any Treasury, now needs new sources of revenue to swell our collective coffers at a time when the deficits remain dangerously high, and indeed in what might be regarded as normal peacetime conditions, an unprecedentedly high rate of deficit that we have in place. But I also think it would be wise not to ignore the level of public anger at the willful tax avoidance by many of the digital disruptors who are potentially some of the beneficiaries of this patent box plan, and his influence upon the Western economies has at times been somewhat pernicious. The sobering truth is that the global technology and communication service providers' stratospheric growth over the past 2 decades has been aided by their ability to avoid taxation. Whether it is Google, Uber, Facebook, or Apple, to name but 4, they have been able to squirrel away their profits to the most tax advantageous manner. And I very much hope the Treasury will look at this as well as issues around the patent box, not just in the next 6 months, but in the years to come, to ensure that we have a more equitable situation that will be accepted by the public at large. I accept also in this regard, in relation to both the creative industries and global technology players, that it would be wise to reflect that perhaps elements of this advantageous tax treatment, not just by the UK government but by other governments in the Western world, has been the price that we have had to pay, the taxpayers have paid, for governments being, in order to secure the essential cooperation in the sphere of internet surveillance, which Western governments believe, rightly in my view, is so vital to national security. However, I do believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it is time to recognise that corporation tax, as we know it, is now probably past its sell-by date as an appropriate means of capturing value in a modern, globalised economy. A levy on turnover rather than profits might in time be the best way forward, and I appreciate this is not necessarily the place to be making policy on the floor of the House, but I do hope the Treasury will give some serious thought, particularly in these sorts of industries, going forward. I always worry when here comes from the wrong quarter, and I only wish there were a few colleagues behind me perhaps also agreeing, but from Wolverhampton, South West and elsewhere. If I might just say, at the beginning of the year, Google made the headlines when it was revealed that despite employing some 2,400 people in the UK and harvesting a national estimated profit in excess of £1 billion, and we weren't obviously to know exactly what that profit level was, it was able to pay corporation tax essentially at a level of just 3%. Even before its recent travails, Apple last year declared foreign pre-tax profits of some $47.5 billion, on which it paid only $4.7 billion, some 9.9% of tax, compared with group-wide income taxes of some $17.7 billion. It suggests that taxes on profits are not going to be the right way forward, particularly in these global industries where, as I say, there is a risk that money can be squirreled aside. That said, I think it is important to say that the patent box, whilst purportedly and perhaps in some ways giving preferential treatment tax treatment in this area, one that we should look closely at, nonetheless has, as I say, brought some quite significant benefits. I think one of the biggest problems that faces many internet businesses as they grow is to being able to quantify the value of their intellectual property rights. And in many ways, failure to do that means they don't get that opportunity to be able to collateralise their book value to be able to borrow for the future. And we need to try and find some way, and I think the patent box has paid some successes in this regard. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, apologies for sort of rather jumping the gun, because I know that I'm slightly more interested to see the justification from the opposition benches for their new Clause 10. As I say, I don't actually feel that it would be the right way forward at the moment, but I think there are some important debates that we need to have in relation to the workings not just of patent box types legislation, but ensuring that we have a level playing field, more importantly one that is actually understood and supported by the general public. I think nothing has been more damaging for many of the big internet technology and service providers than the slew of bad headlines we've had for the last few years in relation to their avoidance of tax, something that I think, particularly in these difficult economic times, that we can ill afford in this country.